bleh. Um, let us do that. I think we're good. I think everything's set up. I've been trying these Twitch profiles to like make sure that I've got my login information all set up, and it's been working like a charm. I've got my fucking shit there now. So like now I can just click into Twitch or YouTube and it'll make sure that all my settings are set for the proper streaming bullshit, and I don't have to fuck a penguin in order to get the shit done right. Um, let me test the audio. Cool. All right. I think I'm a little buzzy, so I'm just gonna make an annoying noise with the microphone here and make sure that's not the case. All right. Well, let us do quick audio. So somebody say something. Yeah, something. That's a good. There you go. Say something again. Actually. Yeah, that's weird. Oh, okay. So it's a good thing we're doing this test right now. I almost fucked us up. They would have been able to hear you ish, but not well. So let me. There we go. And then okay.
Was it because of the Twitch settings again?
No, actually, it was because last night, I was playing Halo way too late with a person I'd known for like a couple decades, and for some reason, changing settings in the game menu like started blaring the game at full volume for the entire house at like 1 something in the morning, and that wasn't good. So I immediately panicked and unplugged the HDMI cable, and it fucked up the audio balance on a bunch of settings. So that's why it's also my fault. So let us go, and we're actually good this time. It's actually working. I should have seen the levels before and saw that the desktop levels were not leveling. Anyway, good stream coming. We got Kareem, Keith, Hody, and Rose. And we've got this topic of interest, an interesting topic. And that is imperialism under Trump, because he's signing all these EOs, he's saying all these things, and these things are not good. So, with all that being said, let's start with introductions. We'll do Keith, Kareem, Rose, Hody.
Well, my name is Keith Preston. I'm the senior editor of a new zine called attackthesystem.com. That's been in operation for about 24 years. And I've been involved in anarchist and libertarian activities and dissident political activities generally for about 35 years.
All right. Kareem. He's messing with his lips, so that's a good sign. I got to do that too. We all got to plump our lips a little. Got to get this stream going right. Yeah.
I'm trying to communicate telepathically. That's what Zerzan told me.
What, we're all supposed to get lip injections, I guess?
Well, no, we do natural lip plumping the way that Jordan Peterson talked about. We've got to bite our lips a little bit to make them a nice little bit redder. Like, now I'm sexual for the office place. Now I can compete in the hierarchy. Kareem.
Oh my now I can abolish it.
All right.
Because that's what Thought Slime said. He knows what it. So I am Kareem from Anarch Unity. You can find me on X at Kareem6633. Still part of Mises and part of Mad Liberty EXE. Go follow those, and also check out attackthesystem.com. And I'm a narco-pluralist, but if I had to pick something, which eventually, hopefully I will, it would actually be narco-syndicalism with worker self-managed industries. So if you're watching this, anarcho-capitalism is not, in my opinion, good enough to stand on its own. And to prevent the Nozick problem of monopolies taking over, you need actual competition from libertarian socialism, which I do consider a genuine form of liberty.
Rose.
And I'm Rose. You all know me by now. Small libertarian. Also been a big libertarian for about 4 or so years now. I'm part of the Libertarian Party of New York, we have a podcast called The Liberty Test. We'll be recording another episode of that this week, so you can check that out on the Libertarian Party of New York YouTube account. It's good to be here again, as usual.
Hody.
I'm Hody Johns. I am with the Love First Christians. I love fighting the culture war and being on the right side of that culture war, and it's been excellent to be here and seeing you all again. It's been too long, and I'm really excited to get back into tearing apart politics. Biden's let the door hit him on the way out, and I am so happy to be done with him, and so saddened to be dealing with a different set of garbage. The past 24 hours between Biden's stuff at the end of his office and Trump stuff at the beginning has been a mess, but you guys make me feel so much better about it. It's just nice to vent. So happy to be here.
And that you know, to be honest though, what's unfortunate is that Biden has actively prevented the door from hitting him on the way out in terms of like the pardons that he gave to his criminal organization's family and administration. I think he is a scumbag who did not get hit nearly enough by nearly enough doors.
You'll get no argument with me from me there. You are correct.
Yeah.
If he did get hit by a door, would he know it? Come on, God love you, man. Come on, man.
He got hit by. I think he needed, like, on the way out, we just needed to, like, for one last thing, for one last time, for one last piece of posterity, we needed to put a flight of stairs in his path so that he could trip up it again.
Well, I just want to let you know that Larry Fink is still your president, along with the Vatican.
Exactly.
And the Federal Reserve.
And the House of Saud.
Well, ex-presidents still get to fly on, not Air Force One, but like one of the major planes, right? So he'll still get to ascend a staircase and has plenty of opportunity to trip. Yeah, they probably just won't record him ascending staircases.
Air Force 12, it's like the number that corresponds with the age he starts to sniff.
Oh, God.
Air Force 0.
Yeah, right? He's just like, I love that new baby smell. Anyway, the general, so first comment we've got is Ryan Holes says Schedule F is back in place, and it was announced that interviews for existing staff will ask who they voted for. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That's really fucking bad too. For anybody who forgets, when we went over Project 2025, Schedule F is the thing where basically loyalty checks are the resume for whether or not you can work for TERP. So that's bad. That isn't good. So let's start then. We'll start with Hody because he's looking at the executive orders right now. Which ones stand out to you as the worst?
So the nice part is they are actually organized by like immigration, social, and foreign policy. So when we're dealing specifically with imperialism as we are an episode, there are 3 of them. All of them are actually relatively short reads. We'd be able to get through all of them in maybe about 5 minutes each, like 15 minutes or something. The 3 are the one, this is literally the name of it. This isn't me being like lazy and wordy. Designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations, and especially designated global terrorists. That's 1. 2, America First Policy Directive to the Secretary of State. And the 3rd one is called Reevaluating and Realigning United States Foreign Aid. Now, on one level, some of these could be good. I'm going to go backwards in the level of egregiousness. Reevaluating and realigning United States foreign aid is absolutely something that is appropriate to do. We oftentimes, find out Osama bin Laden was on our payroll and then he blows up our buildings and we're like, oh, were we paying that guy? Whoops. So obviously, like, there's some appropriateness when it comes to looking into that and asking ourselves, hey, is this really how we should be spending our money? I don't know if this is the best way to do it. But the problem here is that the directive is that Trump and his sycophants in office get to decide who's worthy of that foreign aid. Not like, a normal board or like a group or something like that. It is actually directing. In fact, in all three of these, it directs it to a member of his handpicked cabinet, and they get to decide if it's worthy or not. I'll give you just a little taste, a little teaser, because I've come from the Vermin Supreme's future. I'm using that time machine. Israel gets to keep its foreign aid.
Mm-hmm.
Just tossing that out there, right? Like we all know that that's gonna stick around, right?
It's Ukraine, from what I said.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Rubio's talking about it a little bit. Pete Hegseth, we're talking about who all needs our foreign aid, and there's a good chance that all this after that 90-day period is going to be like, oh, these guys not only need our foreign aid, they need more of it, right? Either way. That is supposition on my part. I have yet to see how. It should concern us that one person is so powerful as to pull the plug on somebody. But from the libertarian standpoint, I understand that, like, hey, what if we just stop giving out foreign aid entirely? That would be fine. There's obviously a problem with America, because when we do this, we tend to give it to people who end up killing us. So, like, that's kind of the added problem. But if all that happens is he takes away a few, even if it's from people like I'm most sympathetic to, like, that would suck, but at least it's something we're not spending. So I could understand how from like an anarchist perspective, you might consider that a win. I wouldn't, because you're still giving out aid to like the bad guys. You just stop giving out aid to the good guys. But I digress. That was probably the least bad. The America First policy directive to the Secretary of State is exactly what it sounds. This is a policy that could very well be written in crayon. It is so basic and childishly written. Laws sometimes come up like this. Most of the time they are very complicated. In this case, it's almost too simple. Basically, they're supposed to look at something and say, is this America first? And if it is not, then they have to reject it, the foreign policy folks. Now, here is the problem that we get to when it comes to these kind of things, is making it a crime, punishable crime, for these people to not put America first. What happens then in a situation where there's like, hey, I'm gonna create an exaggerated example, but you'll be able to see where it goes from here. If all of a sudden it's like, hey, if we send one troop over there and they could die versus like 300,000 innocent Palestinian civilians and they will die, technically the America First policy then would be to risk to kill the 300,000 Palestinians as opposed to risking the one troop. Mm-hmm. So, obviously that's bad. Okay. So that's whenever you have these, what it's doing is it's taking away the decisions that they're permitted to make. And we should be flexible with the decisions we're permitted to make. We should be allowed to say, hey, listen, I think this is a good idea. I think this is not. The one that's going to take up, I imagine, the bulk of our time here, if we're talking about Trump and the executive orders and his overstepping and how problematic he's become, then the issue that we're looking at here is going to be the one that is called designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designed global terrorists. The way it's written, the problem here is not only that you can treat the cartels like an active, ongoing threat, imminent danger to United States citizens, but they have to. Mm-hmm. His division has to. So this would make war not only likely with places like Mexico, but actually probable. If it's to be adhered to, right? Like that, this would make it so that this person would be like, well, I am legally bound by taking this position to engage in a war with Mexico that is protecting these cartels. And if you think, well, it's the fault of the government for protecting these cartels, many governments do it by accident. They give out money left and right. Everything's a big complicated web. And so you could argue every government does this. Two, America especially does this, right? Like where we fund cartels. And this is something that now it specifies only foreign cartels, so we would not engage in a civil war with ourselves. Obviously, with all the cartels, we have a grape cartel, for goodness sake. We have an education cartel. Like we have if we actually, committed war with the cartels, we'd be like killing teachers and stuff, and that would suck, right? Like, we shouldn't be doing this. But the problem there, again, is what I've stated, that this kind of mandates going to war with them. Trump admitted when they interviewed him, like, yeah, that's a real possibility. That this is something that could happen. It's not just Mexico. Think of every cartel in the world that is foreign. I mean, we're talking places that have no bearing on the United States.
Right.
Chad, right? Like in the middle of Africa. We could be talking about France. We could be talking about Spain and a Spanish cartel. You would be legally obligated to treat them not just as terrorists, but as an active threat terrorist campaign. They actually have to go to war against them. Now, if I'm to give you any silver lining against about all of this stuff in these executive orders, remember that Obama closed Guantanamo Bay by executive order, but they stayed open. These are supposed to be binding, but they're often not, and sometimes people can tell they're unconstitutional immediately.
Right.
All three of these that I've mentioned are it would be very easy to make a basic legal argument that they are not constitutional, in which case you would be able to ignore these directives until the courts compelled you otherwise.
Yeah, 22 states are suing.
Correct, right. Yeah, so you've got stuff like that. You have many states that are saying, like, I'm not going to do this. Florida is currently the only state that has complied with renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, for example. So, like, and what will happen is this will go to the courts and they'll determine one way or another if this is legal or not. And because you are a government bureaucrat and you're protected, you could just not follow these and wait until the court forces you. And then when the court forces you to, there's no penalty for having ignored it up to that point. You do have to have a basic legal argument. So one of the problems, like with hospitals that did like abortions and stuff, like, or that wouldn't do abortions because like the wording got really complicated after overturning Roe versus Wade, they erred on the safe side and just did whatever the mandate maybe wanted them to do because they didn't want to deal with the legal, hey, can you defend this in court? Mm-hmm. And so it is scary because all the people that get these directives could say, I'm just going to do what the directive says because I don't want to go against Trump. I don't want to take it to court. I saw what happened in the last administration when people tried to stand against Trump. I don't want that to happen to me, and I don't want to go down with the ship. If everything goes down here, I want to be one of the people he pardons, that he forgives, So those are the three. That's kind of my feelings on it. They are all three, of course, bad. They could be good if I trusted these people, but I don't. And even if I did trust them, the goal for liberty is not to consolidate that power into somebody I trust, because it'll end up being filled by somebody I don't trust someday, right? Like the goal is to outsource it to, market it, make this, even if you're not a total anarchist, just make it so that there's like a body that is not beholden to political ideologies that takes care of this. Like if there's to be an America First policy directive, I want it done by people who are like ethical and who I don't want to blow up American citizens, but I understand that like killing 300,000 Palestinians to get their oil, that is technically a fulfillment of the America First policy directive, right? Obviously, that is like completely unethical, but it is being demanded for in these, in what's written here. So that's what I have to say about it.
So I'll make a quick response. First off, LP Alliance is in chat. Hello. Go check out lp-alliance.com if you want to see a site that I threw together for him. And if you want similar services, hit me up. I only cost your spirit. Deplorable Kulak, I see you there in the chat again. You should send this to a Trump group chat you're in. Or like all of them that you're in. Definitely anybody that you're affiliated with who is similarly deplorable, feel free to send this link to them and get them in the comments as well. More the merrier. Like my general response. So the first thing I thought when he started talking about inner cities, and like the cartels, and like all this stuff, if he's doing that, what he's doing is, first off, there's still the 100-mile Constitution free zone. He did not get rid of that. There is no executive order abolishing that strip of land on the outer edge of the border to like bar Americans their rights. Most major cities are in that constitution-free zone, which means that the people who are in those zones, the people who are living in the vast majority of inner cities are going to be subject to military action. He has declared a state of emergency. He has declared that the state of emergency is relating to a foreign threat. He has declared that troops can be applied to that foreign threat, and he has directed that foreign threat toward the inner cities where these gangs are that are affiliated with these cartels. He has set the precedent for violent military crackdowns on the inner cities, and then when people asked him about it, he says, "We'll see about that when we get to it." He didn't say no. He didn't say, "I'm not going to stage military raids in the inner cities." He said, "I'm going to see about it when it comes." That is fucking evil. But these people are in fact fucking evil. And so this is the advent for me of the fascist state that people have been warned about for so long. And I'll say that, and then I'll throw it to Kareem, and then Rose, and then Keith, and then after Kareem and Rose, for Keith, if you can remember this by then, I want your general reference to when similar things like this have been have happened historically in terms of other fascist countries. So we'll go to Kareem for his response he's making now, then Rose for her input on the general things here, and also some context maybe if she's got some, and then Keith for his sort of historical answer on that. Kareem?
So, he just pardoned Ross Ulbricht, which is good. Why did he do that? Because Angela told him to. But he didn't do that because he wanted to end a drug war. And that's the difference fundamentally between populist and libertarian. Populist will do what's popular. It doesn't matter what it is. Oh, ending Gaza's popular? Okay, I'll do that. Kamal lost for that. Oh, okay, pardoning Ross is popular. It's trending. I'll do that. Warp speed seems popular. I'll do that. So whatever's popular, will ever make you the cool kid, he'll do. Now, that made sense in 2016 when he wanted to get reelected, but there's no reelection chance this time. So he can do whatever he wants. So trying to make popular is not a good idea. I think instead of declaring war and the AI surveillance and all that stuff, what we ought to do is the simple cost-free way, which is we stop funding like the government stop funding. I don't mind if mutual aid networks are created everywhere. I don't mind if Odie takes in 3 refugees from somewhere. That's the Christian thing to do. I don't mind if Rose does. Hopefully they're ANCAP man and ANCAP stand. I don't mind actual voluntary help for people who want to come here. What I do not like is government subsidizing all this stuff. Now, government creates this problem by foreign intervention, imperialism, just what they're doing. So you stop giving out money, stop foreign imperialism, you end the drug war, you make it the process simpler. You allow people who, have some merit, definitely to come through. I don't think criminals are going to want to if they're not going to get any kind of aid or anything like that. People, so because it's tough to make it with just charity. Also, it's an issue concerning, going to war. It's we just keep going to war with this country and that country and this country and that country. What happens in Mexico, because we know how U.S. foreign policy works, when you're like, oh, okay, there's cartels here. We destroyed a whole village. Oh, there are kids there. Collateral damage. And then I bet you will hear the same. Were they cartels? Does this sound familiar? Do you condemn cartels? Do you condemn cartels? It's all the cartels' fault for the deaths. Does that sound like another group somewhere else? Oh, it's just the cartel. And I don't think the president of Mexico and people in Mexico, not that I like her, she's authoritarian Marxist and libertarian socialist, but anarcho-pluralist. But the fact remains that doing foreign intervention on Mexico in my opinion, is going to cause collateral damage for sure. The U.S. ain't that careful. Neither is ISI. They just kind of bomb where they think, based on, I don't know how they gather intelligence, to be honest. They just kind of bomb because a bad dude might have been in that city and blow up the whole city. And that's the problem I foresee. This is not to say that the cartels are good people. They're not. The vicious people as well. But we can end them by ending the drug war, which put Ross in jail in the first place. We can end it by ending overseas adventures and by having more tight-knit communities with mutual aid so we can help people. And I think that will sort itself out with bad people and stuff like that. Also, in my opinion, he will not, if he wants to significantly reduce imperialism, I don't know exactly how you do this. I think Congress said you can't leave NATO, but I guess I would go to NATO. I'd go to the Supreme Court now and be like, hey, man, I want to get out of NATO. This is a Cold War relic. I like David Icke calling it the North Atlantic Terrorist Organization. I haven't seen a good use for it other than bomb Serbia, Libya, Syria, Kosovo. What am I missing? I'm missing some countries.
Yemen.
So, Yemen.
And Somalia.
Somalia. Maybe Palestine, depending on how you look at that, because they kind of, buddied up there too and didn't win. So, to me, if you can do those things, yeah, that'd be a slam dunk. The problem is, I think he just gave us kind of like, hey, here's Ross, here's a couple executive orders, here you go, kind of just appease people. And also, while he freed Ross, he lifted sanctions on West Bank settlers from attacking Palestinians in West Bank.
Yep.
Now, who gave him $100 million to do that? Miriam Adelson. Now, I would say in most cases, Bill Clinton, George Bush, the psychopaths, you need money to campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't. He could have just launched a meme coin and campaign without any interference or got it from the donors. So he's still in the pocket of Miriam Adelson and the donors. You got to do what the donors want, but yeah, let's give some people some breadcrumbs. That's my analysis.
Follow the money, cui bono, always. Tyrantulas, in the chat here, send this to as many Trump supporters as you know. Get them all in the chat disagreeing with us. The more, the merrier. Rose.
Yeah, sure. So I'm glad Kareem brought up the whole thing with the declaring a national emergency on the southern border, and then also declaring drug cartels to be terrorist organizations. Because that could be considered to be part of his America First plan, because he's playing on a lot of the fear that Americans have of things like fentanyl and the drug supply, which has worked its way into just about everything. It's playing on the fear that Americans have of all these gangs that are supposedly taking over U.S. cities. Now, do I think people are naturally migrating here and taking over cities? No, I do not. I do think that there have been some powerful special interest groups that have been essentially trafficking people around the country. Exact reasons are unclear, but likely has to do with labor trafficking, or possibly in the hopes of using them for military service in the future at some point. In any event, this has led to enough frustration. This has led Americans to be frustrated with what they perceive as people who they think are getting things like welfare benefits or stealing jobs or whatever, that it's led people to get behind any policy that they perceive as beneficial to them, because they think it's going to be used to expel those foreign invaders.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the drug cartel. They think that, these drug cartels are bringing fentanyl into our country and killing Americans, and they're smuggling those people who are stealing our jobs into the country. I don't think they've thought through what this means. Okay, one, this is essentially declaring war on Mexico. I can't see this leading anywhere good. Two, drug cartels, like Kareem already pointed out, exist because of the U.S. war on drugs. Like, Mexico has wanted to take a step back from the drug war so many times. They've been stopped from doing so by the U.S., which has a vested interest in continuing its drug war. But they also have people have probably also not thought about the fact that, like, again, this is just yet the latest expansion of the war on terror. Okay, like, okay, first it was the Patriot Act, and it was only being used to go after those scary Muslim Americans who might be terrorists. So no one, or rather, yeah, the Republican voters at the time were all very behind it, along with many of the Democrats. It was fine when it was only being used on foreigners. Then, like a lot of us accurately predicted, 10 or so years later, all of a sudden we're hearing about domestic terrorism being a problem. Then, more and more, we're hearing about domestic or political extremism. And we're seeing the war on terror being turned against U.S. citizens, just like we predicted it would be. Okay, the war on drug cartels is just the latest expansion. Now, this is going to be used to target anyone who may, first it'll be used to go after not just people in the country illegally, but people who are living here on work visas or green cards, because you might be part of a drug cartel. Then it could be used to go after anyone who has foreign ancestry, like who is a direct descendant of people who recently moved here, because, hey, you could still have connections to cartels. Okay, we need to make sure that you're a patriotic American and that, you're not a traitor to the country who is working for the cartels. It's also going to be used to justify further crackdowns, or at a time when public sentiment wants to move away from the drug war and wants to move more towards rehabilitation-focused solutions and decriminalization. This could easily be used to just, move back towards incarceration and harsh penalties. Trump has already said he wants to execute drug dealers. So, look, glad that Ross was pardoned. I just hope that the cost of that is not having thousands and thousands more Rosses who would never get pardoned. Like, this was obviously...
Yeah.
Again, I'm glad he was pardoned. It was a political stunt. Doesn't take away from the fact that one person is free, but I don't think he's going to take that principle and apply it to other people who are wrongfully incarcerated. I think, again, it was a political stunt, and also, if it's true that the people who helped prosecute Ross had anything to do with the people who went after Trump, it also was just a middle finger towards the people he thinks went after him.
Right.
Yeah. And also, one thing I think is if you had people like Hody or Jacob Winograd or some other individuals on Facebook to solve the drug problem, I think they could come up with a decentralized Christian religious-based solution to help people through, loving them, and kind of like what Portugal did. If you watch, I'm not a social democrat, but if you watch Michael Moore's film, Where to Invade Next, he explains how Portugal got rid of the drug war. They're fine. They don't want to go back. Portland did it. They don't want to go back. Not like the way Portugal did it, because it was more organized, but still, freedom. But I think we need that end the drug war and find, maybe it's religious and community-based type solutions to help people who are suffering through mutual aid networks. And before people say mutual aid doesn't exist, it definitely does. People on the right want to call it something different. They want to call it capitalism or donations or charity. And I haven't seen anybody who's against that, except Liquid Zulu. I think the only charity is...
yeah, but that's because Liquid Zulu is a mindless hack on a lot of subjects.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah, but it's also true. Like, I have this. I'm working on a video response to a thing that I saw him put out. I think in conjunction with Ace Archist, that made the case for destroying the environment being good. And I think that's absolute. It's absurd on its face, and it makes me destructively angry.
But it sounds like one of those things that like the kind of thing you say to be edgy, but then you read it and it's actually not. It doesn't mean literally destroying, but like
no, it meant that he's on video saying, for instance, that if somebody wants to take a big pile of garbage and put it right in the middle of an iceberg in Antarctica, good, let him do it.
But like, what's the benefit to that?
The last thing I'll say is Trump's promise. I think he made this in Michigan. Now, this was directed at Gaza, but he said he would end Ukraine in one day. He would end Gaza. Maybe give him some credit for that. I don't know. Give Yemen some credit for that, too. But he said he'd end all wars. Now, you can't be starting wars to end wars. So you got to find a reasonable alternative.
And
he's not ended Ukraine.
And I'll get into that too. I want to give Keith some time to share his insights, and then after that, I'm going to respond in general to probably what he says, but also in specific to what you just said, because that ties into like my grander conspiracy theory in this regard.
Okay, could you repeat the question you asked me at the beginning so the audience it's fresh in the mind of the audience?
Basically just like historical context for these sorts of acts of imperialism, what the executive orders imply in terms of like, you know, how things like them have been used in the past, various things like that. Like basically, this is another example in my view of history repeating. This is more just like xenophobic, jingoistic kind of saber rattling, and I believe you could like expound on that sort of thing from that perspective.
All right. Well, there's a whole lot there.
Yeah.
First of all, we because we have the Trump administration incoming and it's a Republican administration, we have to first look at the Republican Party as it is today. If you look at who the shock troops of the Republican Party are, it's these know-nothing nativists, these anti-immigration people. That's very much within American traditions going back to the early 19th century. It's these low church evangelical Protestants, again, very American. It's the Israel firsters, the pro-Israel crowd, the Christian Zionists. And it's these paranoid conspiracy theory, what Richard Hofstadter called the paranoid style, which is also very American, your Alex Jones types. And then there's also, in a broader sense, you've got the petty bourgeoisie. That's the real base of the Republican Party, the small capitalist. And then you've also got the way that the Republican Party has been able to absorb larger contingencies of the working class, mostly from the Rust Belt, but also they're picking up people from the minority working class as well, Black and Hispanics. There's a precedent for that too, and that's the Reagan Democrats and then the Nixon Democrats, where the Nixon and then Reagan were able to pick up a lot of white ethnics in their time as part of their coalition. And then you've also got the Sun Belt capitalists that are the financial base of the Republican Party, and that goes back to the post-war period when you started to see the military-industrial complex really expand. And then you started to see a lot of heavy industry develop in the South. Well, not so much in the South, but more in the South, the Midwest, and the West. At first it was the armaments industry and also petroleum, and then agribusiness, big ag, as some people call it, and then later big tech. If you look at the more philosophical orientations you find among Republicans today, you see elements of all the past Republican administrations represented. You see McKinley, which is sort of a nationalist imperialism, and that's kind of what the Republicans were in the early to mid 20th century. They had this kind of economic nationalism, with sort of a regional, imperialist outlook. That's McKinley, William Howard Taft, Coolidge, Harding, some of those people. In fact, the anti-immigration stuff is very 1920s. It's very Warren Harding. It's very Calvin Coolidge.
Was Warren Harding anti-immigration?
Yeah, that was the 1920s. That was the 1920s is when they passed I forget what it's called, but in 1924 they passed a very comprehensive anti-immigration restriction law that was in place until the mid 1960s when Hart-Celler was passed. But you see all of this. You see some elements of Nixonian silent majority populism. You see remnants of Reaganism as well, make America great again, morning in America. You still got some Bush era neocon types there that have sort of reinvented themselves. So you've got all of these past Republican traditions under the Republican umbrella still. But at the top level, the real owners of the Republican Party are the arms merchants, the military industrial complex. That's really the essence of the Republican Party. And then increasingly in the Republican Party, you've got the Israel crowd, I call it the Zionist elite, or the upper levels of the Israel lobby.
Right.
And then now these tech oligarchs have become a dominant force in American society generally. They've got their hands in everything, and you see how they've colonized the Republican Party successfully. You saw all these oligarchs at Trump's inauguration, Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk and all these other dudes. As far as Israel, Miriam Adelson, the wife of the late casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, she essentially bought Trump's Middle East policy. As far as the ceasefire, I'm glad there's a ceasefire, but I'm skeptical as to how permanent it's going to be. It seems like they've left the door open to start up the war again. Also, I suspect a deal was made where if Netanyahu pulled back in Gaza, Trump would look the other way while they annex the West Bank, because that's always been a longstanding goal of Miriam Adelson, is for Israel to annex the West Bank. So that seems to be what's going on there. But in big picture wise, you were asking me earlier about historical precedents and that kind of thing. If we look at different countries and what's going on in different countries, we see around the world in different places right-wing authoritarian leaders that are nominally becoming heads of state in democratic republics and parliamentary states, but they're creating this kind of authoritarian strongman governmental system. Like, authoritarian political leaders today are much more sophisticated than they were, say, in the 20th century, where they don't really go for all the weird exotic stuff with the crazy, portraits of themselves everywhere, and strange titles, De Führer and Maximum Leader and El Duce and that kind of stuff. That's not really how they do it nowadays.
Except if they're Javier Milei.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, that sounds a lot like Milei.
Yeah. Well, Argentine politics has always attracted that kind of exotic, kind of strange stuff. But the norm now with authoritarian leaders is that they will function within a state framework that is a nominal modern democratic republic, but then they'll rig it in such a way where the head of state is able to function as a de facto dictator without actually calling himself a dictator. For instance, if you asked Vladimir Putin, I'm sure he would say Russia is a democracy. He would say, we have elections. What are you talking about? I'm sure Viktor Orban in Hungary would say that. Probably Erdogan in Turkey, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel certainly claims that. Rodrigo Duterte is no longer in power, but he would have said that when he was in power in the Philippines.
Maloney.
Giorgia Maloney in Italy. All of these kinds of right-wing authoritarian leaders, Bolsonaro in Brazil, they will present themselves, or Bukele in El Salvador is another example. All of these people will tell you that they are Democrats. They will tell you we're functioning as democratically elected heads of state. But what they do is they restructure state institutions in a way that gives the head of state absolute or near absolute power.
Right.
Prior to the current war in Gaza, for example, Israel was split apart with a political war of its own. Because
in parliament.
Benjamin Netanyahu was basically trying to put all the power in the hands of himself and try to just shut down the authority of Israel's Supreme Court. Viktor Orban has done stuff fairly similar to that in Hungary. Erdogan has certainly set up a system like that. Putin is well known for it. There's other examples with varying degrees of extremes. But it's clear to me that what the Republican Party wants is that they want their head of state to be a figure like that. They want an American Erdogan, an American Viktor Orban, an American Netanyahu, someone of that type. They want a head of state who is going to be a de facto dictator, even if the state formally remains a democracy. And I would not at all be surprised that when Trump goes to leave office at the end of his term, he'll be very old by then. He'll be as old as Biden is now, maybe older.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Republicans try to say, well, maybe we should change the Constitution so the president can serve more than one term or more than 2 terms. And even if they don't try to put Trump in office for a 3rd term at age 86 or whatever he would be, it's quite possible they're going to try to do that with his successor, whether that's J.D. Vance or whomever that's going to be. So I think that's the goal of the Republican Party in its current form. This kind of authoritarian president for life who is a de facto dictator, even if the state is formally a democracy. Also, these tech oligarchs, some of these people that are throwing in their lot with Trump, like these Silicon Valley guys, like Musk, I think the kind of system that they want is some sort of technocratic fiefdom, similar to what you find in some of the Gulf states, like Qatar or like the UAE. What that is something that's a very rigid, stratified class system that's basically a type of neo-feudalism where workers and people like that simply don't have rights. In fact, Curtis Yarvin has written he's one of the major theorists of this kind of stuff, and he's written about this extensively, and he's extremely popular and influential on people like Peter Thiel, on J.D. Vance, on Elon Musk, some of these oligarchs that back Donald Trump. So I think that's the class system they're trying to create. And then in terms of their self-legitimating ideological superstructure, which all states have to have to create a veneer of legitimacy, that's why they're trying to appeal to these know-nothing nativists. That's why they're trying to appeal to the paranoid-style conspiracy theorists. That's why they're trying to appeal to the low church evangelicals. That's why they're trying to appeal to all of that kind of stuff. It's because they want that stuff to play the same role in the system they envision that, say, Salafism or the Muslim Brotherhood and groups like that do in Turkey and Qatar and like Wahhabism in Saudi Arabia and that kind of thing. They want these to be the shock troops for the state, sort of a hardcore base that provides an ideological framework that legitimizes the state. Now, in terms of what the actual goals are, the Republican Party, like I said, is controlled by the military-industrial complex, by the Israel lobby, by Sunbelt capital, which is the arms industry, big petroleum, big agriculture, that kind of stuff. They have always been much more interested in Latin America than the more northern wings of the ruling class. Take the Monroe Doctrine very seriously. The Monroe Doctrine means no other world power can have influence in Latin America because we want it for ourselves. And the fact that Trump has appointed Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State is very indicative of that.
Yes.
Rubio was a hardcore neocon. In 2015, he was actually Bill Kristol's favorite presidential candidate. So that's who Marco Rubio is. He's also connected to these Florida right-wing Cubans whose lifelong goal is a war of regime change against Cuba. He's also connected to the anti-Chavismo, anti-Maduro Venezuelans who want the same thing there. In fact, they're already talking about once again trying to have a coup in Venezuela. And beyond that, what they want is they want the American capitalist class to have the kind of domination over Latin America that they had in the 20th century when there was a network of military dictators that were propped up by the United States in Latin America, like the generals in Argentina or like Pinochet and people like that. Now, as far as Mexico, that's what they want in Mexico. They keep talking about how they're sort of hinting at war with Mexico to eliminate the cartels. I think the real thing there is real issue is they want control over Mexico's agricultural and oil production. That's what they really want. They want to make sure the United States is able to dominate that. And a war with Mexico for the sake of wiping out cartels, I think, would be a cover for that.
And I've got more on that too. That's some of the context I have from my conspiracy theory here. Go ahead, though.
And then on the immigration issue, what that it seems to be is an extension of efforts to use all these wars on things going back for about 50 years as a cover for creating a more expansive police state. Like it started back in 1970 with Richard Nixon's war on drugs, and that was intensified by Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr. in the 80s. and then by Bill Clinton. Under Bill Clinton, it was actually expanded into a war on all kinds of things, just war on crime generally, war on guns, war on gangs, war on everything. And then that was intensified even more under George Bush Jr. With the war on terrorism and the Patriot Act and the Military Commissions Act and all of that kind of stuff. And I think that the Trump administration or people within the Trump administration are going to be looking for ways to reinvigorate all of that. And this time around, it's going to be a war on illegal immigration, similar to the war on drugs. Like one of you was asking about the inner cities. They used the war on drugs as a pretext for basically creating a police state, militarized police state in the inner cities. And I think that this time around, it's going to be less drugs. Well, they may use that as well, but it'll also be illegal immigration is going to be their cover for doing the same.
Radley Balco wrote Rise of the Warrior Cop. It's a great book.
Yeah, it is. I'm familiar with that. So at the same time, there are contradictions and divisions among the Republican Party, just like there is between the Republicans and Democrats. There are some Republican interests that like immigration, even illegal immigration, because they like having illegal migrant laborers that are de facto slaves, because they don't have to provide them with minimum wages. They don't have to pay payroll taxes on them, like Social Security and that kind of stuff. But just like the recent controversy over the visas that were the MAGA people and Ramaswamy and Musk and some of these people had a falling out over that. The reason some Republicans like the HB1 visas is because those workers are essentially indentured servants. They come to the United States and they're pretty much at the mercy of whatever company gets them their visa. They can't just quit their job and go to another job if they don't like the way they're being treated by their employer. And so we're probably gonna see a lot of these kinds of contradictions played out. And as far as policies, on one hand, there's going to be efforts to increase the number of de facto indentured servants that are available for American corporations, particularly in the Sun Belt, where like big ag and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they're going to try to use a war on illegal immigration as a means of strengthening the police state on a more general level. So that seems to be the general pattern that we can expect. And I've tried to outline some of the historical precedents for this in this country and in other places. And as far as the other parts of the world in the Pacific, I think the Trump administration, the second one, is going to pay a lot more attention to the Pacific, because Sunbelt capital has a lot more interest in the Pacific because they have more business holdings there. They have more manufacturing there. The Taiwanese lobby, people talk about the Israel lobby, which is probably the most powerful. It is the most powerful foreign lobby in the United States. But there's also a Taiwanese lobby as well,
and a Saudi lobby.
Yeah, don't forget that. Yeah.
Because it's great when the guy who bought Twitter and the guy who's running the country now both got massive amounts of money from the Saudi Arabian government to buy Twitter, to run golf tournaments on his golf courses. It's not a conflict of interest at all.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about Trump is he's just openly corrupt. I mean, he'll just say, "Yeah, I'm for sale to the highest bidder." Isn't it great that the Saudis basically bought my foreign policy? Or isn't it great that the Israelis bought my foreign policy? The Saudis gave me $2 billion. What's there to quibble with? In fact, Caitlin Johnstone had a column the other day where she talked about that. She was saying, if Trump has one redeeming virtue, he makes the American empire look like what it really is. Because he just takes away these pieties. He doesn't talk about. He's not like some of the Democrats that talk about human rights and that kind of stuff. However,
no, he openly said, with Iraq, it was a horrible mistake, but we should have took the oil. In Syria, let's take the oil. It wasn't like, we're here for humanitarian reasons, help the kids. Can't you think of the kids? Blah, blah, blah. The UN charter, all this shit. He just straight up says, let's take the oil. I apologize. I got to excuse me. I am kind of feeling...
Well, with really Gaza, that's one of the goals in Gaza. Like one of the goals in Gaza is technically cleanse the Gaza Strip.
Cut the grass.
Yeah, and then they want to, from there, they want to reorganize Gaza as a tourist resort, that's going to be a commercial center like the UAE. And then also there's oil and natural gas in the Mediterranean off the Gaza coast. They want to access that as well. Yeah. And Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, has already talked about plans for doing this. So that's why I tend to be somewhat skeptical of the durability of the ceasefire agreement. The idea that now we're going to have peace and the Palestinians are going to be able to come back to the Gaza, the ones that are left, and all of I think probably not. I mean, it's going to be just a continuation of what's been going on there for decades, which is there'll be a military conflict. There'll be a lot of bombing. The mowing the lawn, as one of the former prime ministers called it, and it'll be the same thing over and over again. And along with efforts to annex the West Bank as well. And not only that, but Israel is now engaging in all kinds of ethnic cleansing operations, not just in Gaza, not just among Palestinians.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Oh yeah, exactly. I was going to say, well, ethnic Armenians in Azerbaijan, but also ethnic Armenians in Israel itself now.
Yes. Also, what someone predicted is Trump did the ceasefire deal so he could look good, but also so he could turn a blind eye for the West Bank and approve everything they wanted.
Yeah, well, I think Trump saw what a liability Gaza became for Biden, and I don't think he wants that.
No, and he wants a Saudi-Israel normalization, which it kind of are.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, he wants to strengthen the Abraham Accords. He wants Israel to annex the West Bank, and that's what Mariam Adelson paid for. Right. And ultimately, Kushner wants to turn Gaza into a UAE that's under his control.
Yeah. So, yeah. And this is the thing. So here's my conspiracy theory that I've had for a bit now. There are some resources freeing up because of some melting ice north of Russia. There's also a pathway that's opening up because of that melting ice that opens up new trade routes that aren't controlled by the West. This frees up BRICS to be a much bigger powerhouse. And it means that it's a lot easier for them, like BRICS and BRICS-aligned countries, to oppose Western imperialism. Now, I'm not a BRICS guy. I don't like BRICS myself. But at the same time, denying the international powers at play here would be a mistake. The U.S. didn't give a fuck about privacy violations from a variety of governments, not the least of which is the U.S., this whole time. And now they're going against TikTok because China's bad. And, Trump was big at China, like fucking China this and China that, like his previous administration. And he's doing the same thing his entire fucking campaign, just China and illegals. And those two are connected in my mind. Because China is currently the leading exporter of chips that are used for military technology and for artificial intelligence and for all this other shit. And the minerals for that are in Africa, and some of them are in the very southernmost parts of the Middle East and in Asia. And in generally, I mean, not to say that the Middle East isn't, part of either of those, but the general thing is that they've got this resource disparity. They've previously been using the Middle East, Africa, etc. as a resource pit, as a giant way to basically loot those areas. They did this something similar to various parts of South America and Mexico for a long time. That's why you got Texaco. That's why you got Chevron. That's why you got all these fucking people. Because when it comes down to it, the global South is the wallet for the Western hegemonist world order, like the Anglo-American establishment, the Trilateral Commission, the whatever you have it. They all benefited materially from looting South America and Mexico for decades before the Middle East stuff really piped up. And the Middle East stuff only piped up after the U.S. basically created the Middle Eastern terror threat by funding the Mujahideen that splintered off to become the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, ISIS, ISIL, Nusra, whatever you have. And then, right prior to 9/11, the U.S. gives the Taliban $53 million and says, criminalize opium. And what did they do? They kind of did that, but they also then took the opium that they criminalized and sold it themselves, and the Taliban government then had basically corporate sponsorship. They became a giant drug cartel government. And similar thing happened when the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan, where suddenly the Taliban was just given all of this military equipment. Because, whoops, we had to leave in a hurry. No, you didn't. You could have planned this out much more strategically, and you chose not to because you wanted to give them stuff. You already gave them stuff before. And so the U.S. builds up a threat in the region, and then it has a threat to fight. And this is true of the drug cartels as well. The U.S., like the fucking Contras, the working with, like, I think Noriega and like a bunch of other bullshit like that, like constantly plugging away at making sure that Mexico and South America are as unstable as possible because must socialism. Running coups in places like Venezuela, running coups in places like Argentina and Cuba and Chile and all of these places. And suddenly, right now, while they're hawking against China, who is the primary supplier of chips and cobalt and all these minerals that the U.S. needs to make their AI infrastructure, their military hardware, their this, their that, they're suddenly having problems with China, and they might have to tariff those Chinese evil people. But, this Mexico thing down here, that has a lot of the same resources because it's longitudinally the same. It's on the same band of the Earth, right? And so... when it latitudinal, I think, maybe, whatever, the flat one, I forget exactly. I think lat is flat. I think that's the way you remember. But like the general thing is that like they're fucking with shit on the same like horizontal region on the globe, because when you like look at the mineral like deposition, the way that the earth formed, the spinning ball of molten metals creating like the very specific mineral deposit areas, you get very specific areas of cobalt, and it's almost all in the global south. You need that cobalt for your chips. You need that cobalt for your AI. You need that cobalt for your massive technocratic superstates and to compete with other massive technocratic superstates. And if China is going to be the boogeyman, and if China's working with Russia and the rest of BRICS and BRICS-aligned countries in order to unseat your Western hegemonic imperialism, you probably need a new source of materials, and you probably need a reason to do it. So enter the drug war, enter the cartel wars, enter targeting Mexico and South America and saying these cartels are foreign terror threats. Now we got to drill over there and not the Middle East, because the Middle East is becoming too concentrated with a power that's harder to control because of new open trade routes and a bunch of other shit. That's the reason they want to like annex Greenland as well, because it would be easier to control that northern like port like new open channel as well. It all stacks up because the U.S. needs to be resource competitive with the rest of the world, and it wants to do that by building an empire of the Western Hemisphere in the Western Hemisphere. Like, not just having North America be like U.S., Canada, Mexico, South American countries, Greenland, all this other shit. No, it's just America now, and it's America versus the other half of the fucking world. That is fucking terrifying, Rose.
Yeah. Also,
yeah, and Greenland is it's not just strategic, right? Like, it also is a source of a lot of resources that the U.S. needs. So, yeah, if you can just stage a photo op of some people sitting in a pub wearing MAGA hats, you can easily get Americans on board with the idea that we need to try to conquer them.
Yeah. There's a lot to address when it comes to some of the points that Jeremy was raising. Like, as far as China, it's obvious that the American ruling class generally considers China to be their number one geopolitical and economic rival, which is a rational assessment on their part. And the Sunbelt wing of the capitalist class that Trump represents is, or at least that is thrown in their lot with Trump, they are extremely hawkish on China and always have been for reasons I explained earlier. But in a broader sense, the Pentagon issued a report during Trump's first term talking about how the United States is becoming too dependent on technology manufactured in China for military equipment. So that's one of the main reasons you see a lot of this China bashing now.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when it comes to Taiwan, Taiwan is the primary manufacturer of semiconductors on which American technology is extremely dependent. So that's why you start to see this saber rattling over Taiwan as well. Now, in a broader sense, I think one of Trump's main policies economically and geopolitically as well is going to be to try to strengthen the value of the American dollar on the international currency market. And that's the reason that's strategically important is because the dollar is the world's reserve currency. And the Americans are worried about the BRICS undercutting the hegemony of the dollar as the world reserve currency, as all these countries in the global south and West Asia and so forth.
And of course, world reserve is partially connected to the petrodollar, which is heavily Saud influenced.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think there's
go Keith, though.
All right, so so I think one of Trump's main policies, the reason he's talking about tariffs so much and all these other things is because he wants to strengthen the value of the dollar on the international currency market. He wants to strengthen the dollar as the world's reserve currency. I think that's probably going to be one of the main goals of the tariffs he's talking about. Now, as far as the capitalist class interests that are going to benefit from that, that's going to be beneficial to U.S. bondholders. It's going to be beneficial to shareholders and multinational corporations that hold shares in companies that have a huge international supply chain. It's also going to be valuable to value investors that are heavily invested in well-established corporations. If you're a wealthy American expat living abroad or who spends a lot of time abroad, that's very, very good for you. But the cost of that is going to be, it's likely to have an inflationary effect. Like, one thing that's interesting is that in my opinion, the reason Trump won re-election this time around was because of economics voters. Like most mainstream political scientists will tell you that a presidential election is a referendum on two things. One is the performance of the incumbent. Well, in this case, the incumbent was a dementia patient, and then his and then his replacement was put in at the last minute. She was sort of coronated homecoming queen or something like that. All right. Then there's also the economic situation. More and more people are expressing economic dissatisfaction for good reason. So in my opinion, that's why Trump won. It had nothing to do with transgender people or anything like that. But at the same time, we have all this economic discontent, and rising living cost is the main thing. At the same time, I'm inclined to think that if Trump's stated policy preferences are put into place, we're actually going to see more inflation. We're actually going to see an increase in living cost overall. Although a lot of Trump's policy proposals economically are going to be very good for the kind of capitalist interests that are behind him and that he represents. And the main goal, like I said, is to undercut the BRICS by strengthening the value of the dollar on international currency markets. And then as far as Russia, I think Russia and Ukraine are one of the issues on which the ruling class is genuinely divided as to how they want to handle that. You have the one wing of the ruling class that are Europhiles, and they see this as a war against Russian insurgency within the global system. I think you have other sectors that are more indifferent to that. They want to cut a deal with Russia. I think they want to concentrate more on China and on Latin America and on Israel. And so it's entirely possible that some kind of deal will be worked out with Russia under Trump, where basically Ukraine becomes like North and South Korea, or like the former East and West Germany during the Cold War, where probably Russia will keep the four main oblasts that they claim a right to, and then there'll basically be a partitioning of Ukraine, and then West Ukraine will be like the old West Germany, or like South Korea. That'll be the pro-Western or pro-American, or whatever you want to call it, side. I could very easily see something like that being put into place under Trump, although I think that's going to be extremely controversial. I think the elite in the United States are going to be genuinely divided over that. That seems to be one of the things they're genuinely divided on. But I see the Trump administration is going to be very anti-working class. I see them trying to further strip away rights of workers in any context, legal, institutional. I see the policies that they implement are going to have the effect of continuing to rise, to increase living costs, housing, food, fuel, all that kind of stuff, very inflationary. I'm going to see further efforts to eradicate civil liberties, through under the pretense of fighting wars on this, that, the other thing, crime, immigration, drugs, whatever. And I don't see the Trump administration as being very peaceful either. I see them being very hawkish on Latin America, probably trying to carry out coups in places like Latin America, possibly instituting military action against Mexico. Obviously, they're going to be pro-Israel. Obviously, they're going to be pro-Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. Possibly, war with Iran. That's iffy, but they're going to be saber rattlers on Iran. They're also going to probably escalate confrontation with China. Ukraine is probably the only place where they may potentially be more dovish than, say, Biden has been.
Yeah. Kareem, I'm sure you have an absolute lot to say.
I do. I apologize. I'm not all there, but I'm trying. So yeah, everything you said is true. And one interesting thing, even why does Morris want to go to Musk to help humanity? No, he wants the lithium there. Same with, I want to clear something up. A lot of people said I support Maduro. I don't. I don't think Marxism or Leninism or Maoism or Stalinism or Pol Potism or Ho Chi Minh works. I like one quote from them, but I saw that they wanted to get lithium out of Venezuela. And I was opposed to that. I said, if you kick the colonizers out of your country, that's good. It's your lithium.
Yes.
If they want something, trade for it. If you can't trade for it, too bad. I want more Bitcoin and Solana, but I can't go put a gun with somebody and say, hey, I have to trade for it, or, pump a meme coin. So my question to Keith would be, we have one side still. Yeah, we got some small wins, maybe Ross Ulbricht, and maybe he's not going to give. I don't like the idea of foreign aid, even if it's all good, because it's taking taxation from people and giving it to people. And even if you're giving it to poor people, it's still immoral. It's still taking taxes. You should encourage people to donate themselves. So, that being said, I'm curious. We're all here anarchists pretty much. And we all believe in unity. And Cake Baby wrote a really good article. And Trump's going to make it tough for the working class. Where do you see an opening for anarcho-pluralism and some working class-based anarchy philosophies like Chomsky talked about, now that he can't talk, now that Dave Prager's dead? Where do you see the opening for people like me, Jeremy Hody, maybe even yourself, maybe even some ANCAPs that are pro-leftist or working class, to help counteract the BRICS and also counteract the, you want to call it the WASP alliance or something?
Yeah, take 3 or 4 minutes to answer that, and then we'll go to Rose and Hody. They haven't spoken in a bit, so.
Sorry.
All right. Well, if I had to make a prediction about what's likely to happen, I think that the Trump administration is going to be very unpopular in the long run. I think they're going to impose a lot of policies that are unpopular, and in particular, they're going to fail to deliver economically. And it's quite likely that when the midterm elections come along, they're going to get hammered, and it's quite likely the Republicans are going to be voted out in 2028. If we look at American history, partisan cycles tend to go in about 40-year periods. And right now we're in the middle of what should be a Democratic Party dominated cycle up until about mid-century. So I don't think the short-term prospects for the Republican Party are actually that good, even if Trump managed to win this election. I do think that we actually may, though, be entering a period of relative stability, say, late 2020s, early 2030s, because there's been a lot of upheaval and chaos in recent years, and I think people are getting burned out on that. And quite possibly, once Trump leaves, Democrats will come in. They'll put into place some token Bernie Sanders-esque type reforms, and that'll kind of be it for a time. But I think that when the shit's going to hit the fan is going to be around mid-century, because when Gen Alpha reaches adulthood, and they realize that they're living in a 19th century economy. I think that's when the shit's really going to hit the fan. Also, that is, if you look at the historical cycles, you see that you have these 70-year cycles that within them they include about 15, 20, 25-year periods where you'll have a period of stability, then you'll have a period of upward rebellion or change or idealism, and then you'll have a stabilization period after that, and then you'll have a crisis period, and then we'll have another stabilization period. So we're headed for another period of, say, rebellions or uprisings, similar to, say, the late 19th, early 20th century when you had the labor movement, or the 1960s and 70s with like civil rights, Vietnam War. We're due for something like that around the middle part of the 20th century. And I think socioeconomic issues are going to be critical to that. Like around the world, there's a growing class of people that a sociologist named Joel Kotkin calls the overeducated underclass. And I call it the lumpen bourgeoisie. But these are people who have more education than social status or economic status. It's these kinds of people historically that tend to make revolutions and radical movements. If you look at every movement of that type going back to the early modern period, it was typically this kind of left wing of the middle class that made it happen. Whether it was the Cromwell Revolution in England or the American French Revolution or Bolshevism or any of that kind of stuff. So I think we're going to start to see some sort of insurgency by this class around mid 20th century, and not just in the West. I think it's going to happen in China as well. You see some of these kinds of trends developing in China also. And also in the United States, there's also going to be a big demographic changeover during that time. I'm not sure how that's going to affect things, but I think that's going to contribute to upheaval as well.
Can I ask one thing supplemental to that?
Sure.
So, I'll let Rose go. So I think I'm going to ask. Funny enough, the 1930s, something pretty cool happened in Spain. Is there the ability to recreate that with a cyber world? And I believe there is, with things like DAOs and democratic voting to actually change things. Maybe I'm over optimistic, but
I don't think it's going to be like Spain, because that's the equivalent of what would have been called a third world country. That was a barely industrializing society. So I think that kind of model is out of vogue. I do think, though, that something like what you're talking about is more feasible. I don't necessarily think class struggle in the future is going to be like the mass labor parties and that kind of stuff like you saw in past times. It might take on a more decentralized paradigm, like the book The Network State by Balaji Srinivasan. I see stuff like that becoming more commonplace. Or someone showed me a book recently called The Sovereign Individual, where it's kind of like people just kind of withdrawing from systems and doing their own thing. I see something like that becoming perhaps more viable than these kind of mass movement type projects you saw in the past.
Rose, I'm sure you have lots to say.
Well, I was going to respond to the whole thing about the overeducated underclass, because I completely agree. There are so many people now who, because they were told from the time they were in kindergarten that they had to get a college education. They turned 18 and they signed this contract that they could barely understand because no one ever taught them how things like compound interest works by design. So
predatory.
They were also told, as long as you get this slip of paper, you'll be able to get whatever job you want and you'll do really well. You'll make tons of money. You'll be able to buy a house and live the American dream. Well, you realize too little too late that was a complete lie. They get even people who get STEM degrees, they graduate with often six-figure debt that they can't they can never even begin to make a dent in, because because then they join the workforce and they're getting paid maybe $40,000 a year for a degree in engineering or chemistry and other things that used to where you used to be able to expect people to make a good living.
Mm-hmm.
This is unsustainable. This really can't go on.
And of course now they want to reduce that even further by replacing a lot of these mechanical and engineering and whatever jobs with AI, because they're we can just get the equations done by this.
With Right. They're starting with like the low-level workers, but yeah, eventually that's gonna start to replace more and more technical jobs. But like, no, so going back to what was said about like about how like people voted, or I was gonna say people voted for Trump primarily for economic reasons this time, because most people don't understand economics. All they remember is that last time Trump was in office, things were doing pretty well. Like we had a bubble economy. People didn't understand that. So all they remember is, hey, last time Trump was in office, I could afford to pay my bills. I could afford to pay groceries. Like it was nice. Like even like with my family, we were able to go out to dinner maybe once a month. We had money left over for things. Now, like a lot of working class families, like we have practically nothing left over. Like I just have to hope every time I get behind the wheel of my car that my car doesn't break down and end up needing $800 worth of repairs, because like that is like all of my savings right there if it does. So people, this is why right-wing populism has gained a foothold in the US right now, because the people think that this is the key to fixing the economy. Now, what I have to wonder, though, this most recent election was very anticlimactic. There was very little, unlike last time, like you're not seeing all these meltdowns from the mainstream media the way you were. You weren't seeing mass protests in the street the way you were last time. Like you have to wonder, like, okay, are there people with a vested interest in letting this guy win because they believe that there's going to be another economic collapse? Like, so Trump's political rivals, like, could they perhaps have a vested interest in letting, if they think that there's going to be an economic collapse, and letting it happen because then they can blame it on their political rival? Like,
there's the old saying that that you never stop an enemy when he's making a mistake. It's
right. Well, I think
Napoleon.
Trump is too dumb to realize. He still thinks he's going to fix America by implementing things like tariffs, but
it's a Napoleon quote, and it was literally a backbone of a significant amount of his strategy, if I understand correctly, is to just let them fuck up and then take advantage of their fuck up, and that's how you can like overwhelm like superior whatever. And like it's like here's the other half of it. Trump knows exactly what he's doing. Like I don't think any of these people are stupid. We were talking about this prior to like the first off, let's get that muted. If people could mute while they're not talking, because we've got an echo somewhere.
Yeah, can't tell the source of it.
But like so we've got in terms of we were talking about this. Hody and I were talking about this because we were talking about the Sieg Heil that Elon Musk did, and how it's so obviously what it was. Like he put his hand on his chest and he put it out in an upward way. That's a Sieg Heil. That's something.
So he wasn't just doing a "my heart goes out to you" salute and realizing midway through, but I've heard all sorts of explanations. I just think like if he was, I don't know, like the guy is a wannabe technocrat overlord, so the idea of him being Nazi adjacent isn't unbelievable. I just don't think he deliberately like outright do a Nazi salute.
I think he did deliberately do it because he wants people to be stirred into a frenzy. He wants them to be afraid. He wants them to think, shit, fascism is here and there's nothing I can do about it. They're just out in the open about it and they can get away with whatever they want. Let's give up. I think
he'd want to make them less afraid and think that they could trust him, though. Like, they think that he's, like, the cool inventor guy who's going to implant a chip in their brain that's going to do all these cool things.
I don't think
he's going to build a colony on Mars. Like being an outright fascist would just scare people away.
I don't think the average person who supports him right now cares about any of the stuff that, like, he's been supporting outright fascism. He said AfD is the only way to save Germany. Alternative für Deutschland is literally fucking as close as you can get to Nazis since the Nazis. That's literally...
I agree. I just think like he's always kept it ambiguous enough that your average person doesn't notice. They think he's just a cool inventor who's the cool free speech guy as opposed to those like other billionaires.
Well, I don't think Elon Musk is someone that's all that calculating, though. First of all, he seems to be on the autism spectrum. And also, he's clearly somebody that doesn't have much in the way of filters. For instance, I think there's some kind of lawsuit or something like that pending against him where he told a female employee once he would buy her a horse in exchange for a blowjob, you know. So it's like, you know, that's somebody that's just a really filterless person. You know, he seems like the kind of personality that would, you know, if he felt like giving a Nazi salute, he'd give a Nazi salute.
Yeah.
He has posted stuff before that shows that he kind of flirts with that kind of ideological framework. He is a South African, first of all. Also,
apartheid South African.
Right, exactly. He's from that generation, and also, you know, one of you mentioned he supports the AfD. Yes. He also seems to have something of a romantic interest in the Prime Minister of Italy, who's
yes.
She used to belong to the young Mussolini club or
yes.
something. You know, like I've seen him kind of, you know, making eyes on her before. So yeah, I mean, but I think more than that, he's just a guy who's gotten so rich and so famous and so influential. He's just trying to test the waters to see how far he can push things. Like, wow, you know, I'm almost like God now. What can I do? You know. Yeah, so and he already seems to be a rather, you know, person that's uninhibited or filterless to start with. So yeah, so I don't know. I could see a guy like that doing a Nazi salute, but then kind of doing it in a somewhat subtle way. Like, is this really a Nazi salute or is this just something else? You know, it's yeah.
That's what I expected. Like, I heard there was a Nazi salute, and I'm like, it's going to be ambiguous. And then I'm like, that seems a little bit like, yeah, not leaving much doubt.
But I 100% agree with Rose, though, that I do think that a lot of the wider elite in the United States are trying to set Trump up for a fall, because I think what happened is that during the Biden administration, a number of things happened that I think motivated the general power elite to think that they better get used to dealing with Trump. First of all, they probably realized Biden wasn't going to get reelected, that virtually any Republican would replace him. And I started noticing, even before Trump was shot in the ear that time, that it looked like for a time Trump was toning down some of his rhetoric about the media.
Yeah.
And I'd also noticed that there had been some moves to kind of roll back some of the criminal cases against him. And I started thinking that it looked like the wider elite had made a deal that, okay, you know, we'll stop trying to tie you up in court if you, you know, play nice on at least on key things. I think some kind of deal like that was probably made behind the scenes, and the wider elite started getting used to the idea of, okay, this time around we're just going to work with Trump because the Bidenists are incompetent, so we got to put that to the side for now. Also, it is true that a lot of serious economists are predicting that sometime during Trump's term there'll be a major economic downturn. Like Marxist economists like Richard Wolff are predicting that. Some Austrian types like Peter Schiff are predicting that. You know, so this is there's a wide, you know, I have friends who are economists who are predicting this. So, you know, there's a wide range of economic opinion that thinks there is going to be some kind of major economic downturn during Trump's administration. And as I said before, I think Trump's proposed economic policies are going to be inflationary and anti-working class. So that by itself is going to, you know, cause problems for the Republicans. So it seems like a lot of the wider power elite are probably looking at it, okay, we're just going to give Trump enough rope to hang himself. We're just going to let him do his thing. He can just run the economy into the ground, and he'll get the blame for it. And then we can purge his faction of the political class or the ruling class when the time comes, or at least you know, rein it in, you know, put it on a shorter leash. That seems to be, you know, something that they may be anticipating. That I think that's a very high probability of that. And that's why we haven't seen as much resistance to Trump. You know, like last time Trump was elected, you had protests and all that kind of stuff. This time,
an absolute meltdown. Like, that was not supposed to happen. I think the Clinton campaign thought he was the one person that she could beat, so they kind of wanted him to be the nominee. But yeah, he was never really supposed to win. But the Republican Party is completely fractured and has been taken over by populists. But Yeah, I think
I'm around. I've noticed
regular ruling class wants them out of the way.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the NGOs and that kind of stuff that the more Rockefeller wing of the ruling class bankroll. I've noticed they haven't tried to organize protests, and I've also noticed the media kind of, offering an olive branch to Trump, like MSNBC and some of those kinds of channels, and some of the normal hysterical anti-Trump commentators, Van Jones and people like that. They're saying, oh well, maybe we can work with him and all of that. There hasn't really been that much of an effort to generate hysteria. So it just seems like there's a general signal has gone out among the elite, that, okay, this time we're going to cooperate with Trump, more than we did last time. But I suspect behind that is a plan. We're going to give him enough rope to hang himself.
So, but I can see where both of you are coming from in that regard. I think the elites want Trump. I think they've wanted people like Trump historically to do their bidding. I think that's why, for instance, they bankrolled Nazi Germany and worked so actively with it. I think that's why they like, Millet. I think that's why they liked Pinochet. The globalist elites love people who will shake up the economy, fuck enough of it up that it's reliant on their global structures, and then force them onto global structures. Like with Javier Milei and his shock therapy. Anybody who wants to read a great book, Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine, details this extensively. And so does Friendly Fascism by Bertram Gross. Both, in my opinion, should be essential reads if you want to understand how all this shit works. And, in both of those respects, basically strongmen are hired by the global establishment to force economies into a state of destabilization and then into a stabilization that more accurately befits the models that the elites are trying to experiment with in the moment.
Well, I agree with all that as well. The ruling class is not a monolithic conspiracy. I mean, it's divided into sectors and factions like everything else. And right now in the United States, there are major divisions within the ruling class. I mean, the ruling class is not only split into different sectors, it's also layered into a hierarchy of its own. So you have different ruling class factions with different interests, particularly right now when there's a lot of divisions in the ruling class. So, there are clearly sectors of the ruling class, not just in the United States, but other places, that want to have some sort of strongman ruler. That's what's called the merchant right. Like Thomas Piketty, the economist, calls that the merchant right, where you have these more traditional capitalist interests that just want a strongman ruler. It's going to crack down on all the stuff that they think is antithetical to their own interests.
Or Rothbard and his literal strategy for paleo libertarianism, his literal strategy for the paleo strategy, working with a platform for the populist American libertarian whatever right.
Are you saying you're allergic to making the Libertarian Party relevant? Jeez.
Exactly, right?
Look how much relevance he got them.
The Rothbardians, though, the Rothbardians, at least in that era, were more oriented towards the petty bourgeoisie. It's like the lower capital, regional capital. I'm talking more about the right wing of upper capital.
Yeah. I'm just just adding those to the list, not saying that they represent the majority or some shit.
But one thing I did when this last election was going on was I tried to look at what capitalist interests were backing the respective candidates. And what I found was interesting is that the majority of millionaires and billionaires apparently were backing the Democrats, were backing Kamala Harris. And that was particularly true of new capital, the sectors of capitalism that are very entrepreneurially oriented in newer industries. Not the petty bourgeoisie, not like you're somebody that owns a regional chain of car dealerships or something. But I'm talking about tech investors and tech entrepreneurs and that kind of stuff. Mark Cuban, for example, he's like a big capitalist who was backing Kamala Harris. And there seemed to be more capitalists in the Harris camp than in the Trump camp. But in the Trump camp, what was interesting is the particular types of capitalists. You had all the kind of stuff that typically backs the Republicans, like the petty bourgeoisie, like regional capital and like the Sun Belt and all that kind of stuff. But beyond that, you also had value investors, like shareholders in multinational corporations, bondholders, people like that. I think you also had the elite of the Israel lobby moved rightward in response to October 7th and started backing the Republicans because they wanted to weaponize the anti-woke thing against the pro-Palestinian movement. That's another big thing. Also, at this point, the tech oligarchs have become so dominant within the ruling class that we've seen them shift rightward in the sense that they're now trying to do what the upper levels of the ruling class generally do, which is they try to have their hands in everything simultaneously. Like I remember in the 70s when the Rockefeller empire was at its peak, the Rockefellers pretty much ran both parties. I mean, David Rockefeller ran the Democratic Party. His brother Nelson ran the Republican Party. In America, the country was like a subsidiary to the Rockefeller business empire.
Exactly.
And the tech oligarchs are now assuming that kind of position. Like, Musk is the new John D. Rockefeller. Bezos is the new Henry Ford. Zuckerberg is the new Andrew Carnegie. And these tech oligarchs,
robber barons, like we went over in the last stream.
Right, you're right. The digital capitalist revolution it's now the same thing as the industrial revolution. These are guys, the new robber barons. But when they get to that level, when the capitalist class gets to that level, sectors within the capitalist class get to that level, they try to spread their wings where they put their hands into everything, where they're controlling the Democrats and the Republicans and and the banks and the industrial systems, where it's all under their umbrella.
Yeah, the coctopus is not the only octopus.
Yeah. Well, that they epitomize Sunbelt capital, that kind of Midwestern big oil.
And they got their money from Nazis too.
Yeah, well, and also the Soviet Union. A lot of their money came from their dealings with Joseph Stalin directly. Yeah. So I think that's where that sector of the capitalist class is now. You have this. Another thing too is, like, if you ever read Marx's 18th Brumaire of Louis Napoleon, he talks about divisions in the ruling class, and when those appear, a sector of the ruling class will step forward and attempt to impose a strong man of their own that exists basically to iron out the contradictions within the ruling class for stability, usually so that one particular ruling class sector can become hegemonic, and there's all kinds of Bonapartism. Like right now, it's interesting because a lot of the Marxist commentators I follow disagree among themselves as to where the real Bonapartist threat comes from, or who because in my view, there are multiple at the same time. Like Caleb Maupin, he claims it comes from this kind of Malthusian Northeastern establishment. He's more against the Bidenists than he is the Trumpists. Whereas Dan Lazar, until recently, he was associated with the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. He argues that no, Trump is the real Bonapartist. But I think what we have is rival factions.
Jeffrey, I don't actually know how to pronounce that name. Maliki says, I found the commies in the chat. Feel free to send a vicious attack mob after us by sending this to all of your Republican friends. Hody.
Which of us are the commies?
Oh, we're probably all commies at this point.
I mean, I'm very used to. I recently, earlier today, got called a commie for supporting free markets. So,
yeah.
Well, I often get called a communist, a fascist, and a capitalist on the same day.
Yeah, like my day is not complete until I've been called both a far-right reactionary and a commie. Preferably bonus points if it happens in the same comment section.
So, it's nearing on 2 hours, so we'll probably start wrapping for today. Hody has said the least in this stream, so if you want to throw out like a really good closing statement, I guess, you're free to do that. Then we'll go to Keith, then Rose, then myself.
Sure. Honestly, I would have had more to say, but you guys are covering a lot of history and a lot of conjecture, and I think that those are two things that it's great, but I don't have any feedback for it. It's history, and it's a lot of thought, and it's all good stuff. I think what can we do, right? Like, I think when we talk about this, we spend a lot of time talking about global elites and shadow powers and big banks and governments and deep states, and that's all way above your head, right? So what do? How do these people get the power that they need? I'm going to throw in one more book, since we're recommending books that you kind of absolutely can't do without. The Guarded Gate. It is about the 1924 Immigration Act and how it came to be, and how that act came to be. The people who crafted that act would later go on to put together the genocides that occurred in Nazi Germany. And this is something that we just say, oh, we're just trying to limit a little immigration, right? And it turns out, we're killing millions and millions and millions of people. How did this happen? Well, they insisted upon a bunch of things that they knew weren't true, but they hoped you were dumb enough not to call them out on it, or hoped that you were scared enough not to call them out on it. There got to be one point in the book where they talk about this with the media, where they would test to see if their power over you was complete. And what they did was they started telling you that people like Christopher Columbus were like Scandinavian white, right? Something that everybody knew was not true, right? And they knew it wasn't true. But they were like, if we don't get any pushback against this, and people say, oh, well, it's printed in the newspaper, he's white, so I guess he's white, right? That's when they knew they had made it, right? That's when they said, okay, now we're ready to push for more government forward.
Exactly.
So they dip a toe into these things. As we mentioned, Jeremiah, you hit the nail on the head, and I know it was reiterated again during this show. Like, they're not stupid, right? Trump's not stupid. It's fake buffoonery. With Elon Musk, I've been an actor before, right? Done community theater. I'm nothing major, so please don't be like, what movies have you been in or anything like that, right? But you can tell when somebody is like nervous, a novice actor. They're like, okay, I'm gonna do this, right? I'm gonna do this thing, but like I'm kind of excited about it, right? And you can tell with the way he's like juicing himself right beforehand, right? Like he knows what he's gonna do, and like he's like, okay, here it is. You can see it his face.
Exactly.
Right? Like this isn't his natural, like, yeah, we did it, right? This is I did the thing, right? It's something that novice actors or amateurs or people with no experience don't think about, right? Like when you're acting. And so this is something that he's testing the waters, right? I don't think he's an actual Nazi, but he's looking to see how stupid you are, how ignorant you'll be, how much you'll let this kind of stuff go. Mm-hmm. And if you let it go and you defend him, perfect. Now they can start implementing something, right? He's got, hey, people are defending me. This is an ancient art. Julius Caesar did this performatively. Those who have read the play, Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare, will remember this scene. Now, obviously, that's a fictionalized account, but this is a real account that happened. Is they offered him the crown, and Julius Caesar was like, no, I reject it, right? Mm-hmm. And what Julius Caesar was hoping was that the crowd would be like, no, accept the crowd, yeah, take it. Instead, what happened is they cheered as he turned it away. Right? They were like, yes, turned out the crowd. And that's when Julius Caesar was like, okay, I'm not ready to be like the total emperor yet. Right? Like I can't seize that power just yet because the people right there, they're dipping their toe to see your reactions, right? So here's like none of these actual elites are racists. It's fun to talk about them as if they're racist. They all know better, right? But they want to see is if you're racist, if you are ignorant, if you, the little guy, are willing to look the other way to let them say racist things and stupid, ignorant, awful things. Now, the things they're saying are stupid, but they themselves are not stupid. They want to see how stupid they've made you. This, while you might feel completely disempowered by the rest of this conversation and talking about all these things that they have organized, you're still the wheel that makes everything turn, and they want to see how greasy you're willing to be so that they can start spinning you, right? They want to see exactly how much you're willing to bend the knee, how much you're willing to bow down before them, how much you're willing to be like, sure, break a promise, whatever, we're friends, right? I'm sure you're trying your best. Oh, sure. Oh, this little act here, I'm sure you were well-intentioned. If you look at the executive orders from Donald Trump and Joe Biden, it's remarkable how similar they are. Big taxes, big foreign policy, problems, stupid immigration decisions, right? Like all these things together. And yeah, there's some things like, are we in the Paris Climate Accords? Or are we out of the Paris Climate Accords? It's not about the Paris Climate Accords. It's not about that, right? That's a cultural issue, right? What they want to do is see how much you're on board and willing to defend them with whatever they do. This means that you are still in control and in power so long as you let them know you reject it. Call them out still when they do the racisms, even if they're not racisms, right? Even if they're not actually racists, you need to call it out, because as soon as everybody looked up that newspaper and they saw that Christopher Columbus was just some Scandinavian purebred Boston-style white guy, they were, and I'm not even kidding about the Boston thing, but like it got ridiculous. And as soon as people opened the paper and we're like, well, they're the eugenicists, they know,
right?
That's when it was over, right? That's when it was like, cool, let's get the big government stuff going on immigration. Nazi Germany, let's start gearing up, guys. People are stupid enough. People are letting it go. People are done fighting us. Never lose that fighting spirit, right? That power that's within you makes you a big problem. There is a reason that Trump and Musk and Gabbard and all these big important people like have started beefing with smaller, tiny little accounts on social media, like retweeting people with like 13 follows to be like, what do you mean I'm not a real gamer? What do you mean I used fake footage? What do you mean I had somebody level up my account, right? With like tiny little accounts, right? Like, oh no, and now we're beefing, right? Until it gets out of control. Why are they willing to beef with those little guys? Because they know those are the little seeds that get planted that end up pulling them down, right? These are the things that keep them in check. They want those checks gone. You can absolutely kick them out of your lives and you can keep them restricted. Now, it's never going to show up on paper. They're not going to build a statue and say, here's the statue of you who said, hey, that's racist. That's a really crappy thing to do. Hey, that's a Nazi salute. That's a really crappy thing to do, right? Now, nobody's going to do any of that, right? You're not going to get noticed. Who does notice? Trump, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, Peter Hegseth, Peter Thiel, all the global, all the foreign powers that they saw, they're like, damn it. Well, I guess we can't, we're not that close yet. I guess we can't push for those extra big tyrannies that we really wanted to do because people are still aware. As soon as you let it slip, as soon as you go, maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. You know what, Trump lies a lot, but maybe this was just a genuine oversight. Nope, that's what they're waiting for. That's what they want, right? Is it like you letting it slide? Don't let stuff slide, right? We didn't let stuff slide under Biden for 4 years. We're not going to let stuff slide under Trump for the next 4 years. That's how we keep things in check. That's why, like, despite these global elites being around for centuries, we still enjoy the freedoms we have today. I'm not saying they're enough. Absolutely not. Right? But we have freedoms today, and we have them because we stand up and we say, no, we're not on board with that. Thanks again for having me on this week, guys. Good talking to y'all.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Also, General Aguilar said something in chat to the effect of, before deleting it, libertarianism is just watered-down liberalism. Feel free to invite all of your liberal friends to tell us that.
I mean, okay. Modern libertarianism is a fusion of classic liberalism and individualist anarchism. I mean, it's actually a lot more. There's more to it than that, but if you really want a very short summary, you can kind of merge those two things if you want an idea of what modern libertarianism is. But that's not quite what libertarianism is.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just watered down liberalism. That's stupid. Okay, I would say liberalism is a watered down version of what we believe.
Yeah, exactly. Keith, you got a closing statement?
Yeah, I guess to add another historical tidbit, right now the time period that we're in is very similar to the 19th century, which is a time of very rapid economic change, very rapid cultural change, a very rapid technological change, and all the related upheavals that come along with that. And right now, what we're seeing with some of these figures that I mentioned earlier, like Trump and Bolsonaro and Putin and Erdogan and Orban and all of that, is very similar to what happened, say, after the Congress of Vienna or after 1848, or perhaps during the late 19th century with the rise of figures like Bismarck, where you had sort of a pushback by reactionaries against the rise of this new ruling class. Like I call these digital capitalists the neo-bourgeoisie, and that's kind of what's happened. We've had this a new capital has become increasingly pervasive, and then we've also seen this kind of process of very rapid cultural change, and we're also seeing a pushback from that from the more reactionary sectors as well, and that's what some of these strongman type leaders advocate. But it's not that either one are your friends. Like a lot of people in our camps, you know, the more libertarian, anarchistic, anti-authoritarian camps, often have this idea, well, we've got to back one or another ruling class faction because the other one is just so awful. But the problem there is that all of them are your enemy, and repression can come from either direction. For instance, in the Red Scare of the 1910s, it was Woodrow Wilson, which was considered a progressive administration at the time, that was behind all of that. It wasn't the right-wing Republicans, you know, that were behind that. And that was also true during the Vietnam War. Remember, it was Lyndon Johnson who was considered a liberal progressive during his time. He was the one that was behind that as well. So it's important to be on guard against all the state factions, all ruling class factions, because they're all out to get you, basically. You know, you're not being paranoid. They really are out to get you.
Rose.
Yeah, if only we could convince certain modern libertarians of this fact that you don't need to align yourself with one faction of the ruling class, because they are not, in fact, your saviors. They are not, in fact, going to bring about the society that you're envisioning. They're paying lip service to your ideas because they know that they can trick stupid people into voting for them and supporting them, and then they'll quickly discard you as soon as you stop being useful to them. Oh, I think I was going to add to like the because we were talking about Elon Musk a moment ago. Okay, like, I mean, I don't doubt that like he would do something like do a Nazi salute on stage, because he knows people are going to be talking about it now for probably months. Okay, was that really a Nazi salute? Like seems like that's a great way to keep everyone distracted. Yeah, he's got other stuff going on behind the scenes. Like, people like Elon Musk are interesting because he's one of the wannabe nationalist technocrats. Like, I think he saw a lot of value in hitching himself to Trump because he thinks that like someone like Trump, who wants mostly nationalist policies, is going to be more beneficial to him rather than people who are a bit more global spanning, like who has power throughout multiple countries. But yeah, I think my favorite recently was because certain people in my circles got really excited because they saw him retweeting Ron Paul with his "End the Fed" slogan, which that's just hilarious because they're like, "Oh my God, you guys, our ideas are finally gaining traction." I'm like, okay, you know what Elon Musk wants, right? He wants to basically have an everything app, which is both your communications, your banking, your pretty much everything. He wants an everything app. He doesn't want to end the Fed because he wants to end central banking or end the state money monopoly. He wants to replace it with something that he has more direct control over. Like, I could see Elon Musk wanting basically his own version of a CBDC, a central bank digital currency. Okay. People who say, okay, you should be very wary of statists when they say end the Fed. They don't mean it the way libertarians mean it. They just mean they want to get rid of the currently existing central bank because they want to have more control over the monetary system and the banking cartels than they currently do. This happens over and over. Like, statists will co-opt our ideas and our slogans because they know there's going to be a huge faction of people who follow that ideology who don't actually understand their own ideology beyond the meme level. So they're banking on the fact that people have heard end the Fed, but don't really know what it means, don't understand that it means you actually need to end central banks and the state money monopoly entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize that they can just get these people to cheer for them and that they can easily pull a bait and switch.
Yeah, like the line from Marilyn Manson, I think, is all too fucking prescient, you know? Losers love liars till their dying day.
Mm-hmm.
And these people have lost for a long time.
Right. it's just so frustrating because you see this happening over and over and over. People falling for the same shit predictably every 10 or so years because somebody paid lip service to ideas that they had, or they thought something sounded good, and they're like, this person is going to fix things, this person's going to be our savior. People want saviors. They want to be able to sit back and trust the plan and trust that some politician is going to fix everything and they won't have to do it themselves. But yeah, there are no saviors in the real world. No one is coming to save you. No one cares about you. Okay, you either need to fix things yourself or things are just going to get worse.
Exactly. So for my closing statement, I guess, first off, I'll tell everyone to check out Attack the System for Keith's stuff. I'll tell them to check out Love First Christians for Hodie's stuff. I'll tell them to check out the Liberty Test for Rose's stuff. And I'll tell them to check out Anarch Unity and Kareem's like crypto stuff for Kareem, who had to leave. I think he's ill. And in general, the general thing that I want to get across is, and I think that this is something that that is partially encapsulated by something that Liberum posted in chat today, which is James 2:24. You gotta you can't just think about it. You can't just feel your way. Real quick, just gonna ask for anybody to mute themselves who isn't speaking. There is an echo. I'm not sure where it is. You gotta walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk or think the thought. And it's like that with everything. With so many of these libertarians, they claim libertarianism. They claim the labels. So many of these anarchists, so many of these freedom, whatever, rebel, etc., etc., they claim the label, right? And then they do the entire opposite when the pressure is on. When it's time to act, they don't. It's like somebody who sins their whole life and then at the last moment calls out for God. Probably not gonna do too well in that regard because your heart will be known. So it's like that mentality. It's that mentality of we can just fake it till we make it. We can just do what we want and it doesn't matter what we actually did, as long as we have the right slogans or do piecemeal little things. That's what Trump does. That's what Trump traffics in. He is a false prophet. That's what false prophets like Angela McArdle and Ben Weir do. That's what false prophets like Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand do. They don't follow the Bible. They're not interested in walking on a spiritual fucking journey with you. They're not interested in moving the needle toward an actual Christ-like mentality or apparatus. They're interested in manipulating you and using a cohesive and excellent philosophy like the kinds of things Christians were supposed to be for, like the kinds of things that Christ was supposed to be for, and pushing hard in the opposite direction. They will use whatever they have in order to make sure that you are at each other's throats and not fighting them, and they will use whatever they can to make sure that they seem good on the surface. At least in order, good to you, to your demographic, to whoever they're trying to pander to whoever they're trying to control. They'll try to make themselves seem fucking awesome to those people by doing whatever those people like. And they'll do just enough of that those people will shut up. They'll, pardon Ross, and it doesn't matter that they're creating a whole lot more Rosses. They'll say that they hate war, and it doesn't matter that they're militarizing the border and trying to go to war with Mexico. They'll say they hate taxes, and then they'll keep the income tax and also stack on a bunch of tariffs that raise the prices of everything, get people fired, and fuck over businesses. They'll do all of this shit. They'll say that AI is so evil, and we're going to be AI's pet in the ideal circumstance. And then they'll create AI applications. They'll say, we don't like Vanguard and BlackRock, but then they'll literally get funded by those people for their things like AI and Tesla and Trump's businesses and all of this stuff. They'll do like the opposite in all of these cases of what they would actually need to do in order to demonstrate that they are against these things, these people, these institutions. And they'll do it while stringing you along by making you feel involved, by making you feel like you have a seat at the table. When really, there's this series called Marshmallow People, and there's this character that comes in partway through while these marshmallow people are trying to figure out what to do because they're so bored. And this character is Triangle Lady, and she's just like, she's saying, well, why, like, I'm here as well. And they're like, fuck off, Triangle Lady. Nobody wants you. And then once she, like, really forces her way in, like, they kick the shit out of her. And her response is to shout, I'm involved! That's exactly what this is. The elites want to use you as Triangle Lady. They want to use you as that punching bag in order to say, well, you're involved. You were upset that you weren't involved before. You didn't feel like the process involved you. And now that it involves you, you should shut the fuck up about anything we do that doesn't do like what we said we would, that doesn't fit the spirit, that doesn't actually act towards your liberty, that doesn't create a better environment. They'll tell you that because you're involved, because you had a seat at the table now, that you're supposed to do what they say. This is leash politics. They are putting a leash on you. They are making you a dog. They are telling you that you now have to be their servant, their vessel for their agenda, because they did exactly a tiny amount that you wanted. They gave you piddly piecemeal while they got away with their tyranny. That's what they did to you. And they're doing it while telling you that what you have to do is cannibalize your fellow person and treat everybody on the class with you like shit if they're not on board with the program, so that they can continue their dogmatic like ascent to power. Their like weird demagogic bullshit power politics rely on you attacking each other rather than them. And they constantly have to get you angry at immigrants, trans people, etc. Like, Trump has this literal bill saying protecting women and like from gender identity, as part of one of his executive orders. Like, he has bills about how terrible immigrants are and how they're all cartel criminal terrorists. He has about this like criminal stuff like with domestic crime, talking about like the inner cities, as though the inner cities are where like there's so much evil crime, where the inner cities have always basically been code for like minorities. It's always this. They've got to have you attacking somebody that you consider the other. They've got to have you attacking somebody that is a convenient target so that they can build their power, they can build their authority, and you will be so tired, so weak from attacking each other that you will never be able to resist their authority. That's what they need. And if you do not rise up against that in this fascist dystopia that's being built right the fuck now, and this imperialist like hegemony that is spread all over the globe, you will never smash the fucking state.